Hello, I am the real-life fake wizard. I am not a Star Trek fan. I have dabbled in The Next Generation and I like Q, but I haven't finished any of the Star Trek series. I say that as a qualifier. I know the basics. Kirk, Spock, Picard, shut up Wesley, but I'm not a diehard fan. And yet, having watched the first 4 episodes of Starfleet Academy, I'm able to come to this conversation as someone who has no dog in this fight. So you could take my words seriously when I say that Starfleet Academy is destroying 60 years of world building. I'm not a fan, and even I can see the damage being done. We've spent years watching entertainment companies systematically demolish franchises that people love. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Marvel, DC, Doctor Who, even Star Trek, the pattern is always the same. New management comes in. They don't understand what made the property special. They chase demographics that don't care about the franchise. They alienate the fans who do, and then they wonder why everything has fallen apart. Star Trek Starfleet Academy is that pattern, running at ludicrous speed. Today's indie game shoutout is Daisen. No mags, no reloads, zero hesitation. Daisen is a fast-paced shooter where scoring is your only cure and weapons are always on the verge of overheating. Mix your arsenal, dance through the arena, and fight the anomalies. To learn more about this and hundreds of other indie games, visit our free indie game discovery network, fakeportal.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. Okay, so I have seen all 4 of the available episodes of Starfleet Academy, and I'm not going to do an in-depth review of each episode. This is probably the last Star Trek video I do. However, this 4th episode has opened the door to a perfect case study in how modern writers take storytelling elements that work perfectly fine in isolation and use them to demolish decades of established lore. The episode centers on a character named Jaden. He's a Klingon cadet at Starfleet Academy, and his arc in this episode is about not living up to his family's expectations. He's shy. He's non-aggressive. He has panic attacks when he has to speak publicly, which is not very Klingon. And in the middle of the episode, we discover that his family abandoned him because he didn't embody traditional Klingon warrior values. Now here's the thing, and I need you to humor me as I say this. Hang on. That story, that concept, the son who doesn't fit his family's mold, the kid who's rejected for not being what his parents wanted him to be, that's a perfectly valid storytelling trope. It's been around for centuries. The Prodigal Son, Dead Poet Society, The Godfather, even Crazy Rich Asians. You can name plenty of stories that use that kind of a trope. Stories about children failing to meet family expectations taps into something real about our human experiences, about one's identity, the struggle between who you are and who you're supposed to be. In a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with that story. But this isn't a vacuum. This is Star Trek. This is a universe with 60 years of established lore. This is the Klingon species, which has been developed across multiple shows, multiple movies, multiple decades of storytelling into one of the most iconic alien cultures in science fiction. And what this episode does to the Klingons is very much unforgivable. Allow me to give you some more context here. Klingons have been part of Star Trek since the original series. Since 1967, they've been developed as a warrior culture defined by honor, combat, and ritual. They have a complex code to live by, and often that results in them being aggressive to defend their concept of honor. They believe that weakness dishonors your entire house, your entire family. They practice ritual combat, the rite of ascension, blood oaths, bath-life fighting. Generations of writers built this culture piece by piece across hundreds of episodes. Characters like Worf on The Next Generation spent years exploring what it meant to be a Klingon, what happens when Klingon values clash with Federation values, how honor and duty can conflict. Deep Space Nine did entire story arcs about Klingon politics, the shifting balance of power between great houses, and the corruption that can infect even a warrior culture. This is one of the most thoroughly developed alien cultures in all of science fiction. Klingon is a household term. I'm not even a lore master, and I know most of Klingon stuff just from being a nerd long enough. Now again, 60 years. Hundreds of hours of television, novels, games, comics, an entire language that people have learned, all building on itself, all internally consistent, all treating the Klingons as a real civilization with real history and very real complexity. And the writers of Starfleet Academy looked at all that and said, what if we made the Klingons sad refugees who need therapy? It's as if the writers had contempt for the Klingons, or rather, they had contempt for what the Klingons represent. According to the lore of Starfleet Academy, there was an event called the Burn that devastated the galaxy. The Klingon homeworld, Kronos, was destroyed. The Klingon Empire collapsed. The species is now scattered across the galaxy as refugees facing extinction. Only a handful of great houses remain, and the word great in great houses is an overstatement. Some of these houses are just 3 people. And you know what? Even that could have worked as an interesting idea. Species face extinction events in fiction all the time. It can be compelling storytelling. How does a proud warrior culture adapt to losing everything? How do their values hold up when the empire is gone? There's potential there, but that's not what the show does with it. Starfleet Academy and the Kurtzman regime use this setting to fundamentally undermine what Klingons are, portraying their values as outdated and need to be fixed. The solution to the Klingon crisis is for them to stop being so Klingon about everything. Jaden's story is positioned as the future of his species, the shy Klingon who rejects warrior values in favor of debate, emotional processing, and having panic attacks. That's what the show frames as growth. This is progress. Kurtzman says this is the right way to be. And in doing so, it tells the audience that 60 years of Klingon culture was wrong, that all those episodes exploring Klingon honor were actually depicting something that needed to be evolved away from. But the episode continues and it gets worse. The Federation had found a planet that would be a perfect new homeworld for the displaced Klingons. But the Klingons won't accept it, because accepting charity contradicts their warrior values. They don't take handouts. They have to conquer and earn their place in the universe. And the writer's solution to this problem? Starfleet stages a fake battle. The Federation ships pretend to fight the Klingon ships and then surrender, so the Klingons can quote-unquote conquer the planet and claim it as spoils of war. Problem solved. Everyone's happy. That's an insulting resolution. The show's message is that Klingon values are so silly, so childish, so outdated, that the sophisticated Federation has to trick them, like you trick a toddler. Oh, you want to feel like a big, strong warrior, huh? Okay, we'll pretend to lose. Here's your planet, champ. Now you're just patronizing the culture, and certainly not respecting the history that came before it. Now the Klingons are too stupid or too primitive to deal with reality, so the enlightened Federation has to stage a little play for them. And this is all framed as a positive resolution. This is framed as the characters being smart, respecting Klingon traditions. The writers think they're being clever. They think they've found a smart solution. What they've actually done is reveal that they don't understand and don't respect the culture they're writing about. And they don't care that they don't care. Now, I can hear some of you, Wizard, come on, Star Trek has always shown diverse Klingons. Not every Klingon is a warrior. Deep Space Nine had Klingon lawyers. They have scientists and politicians and artists. This isn't new, Wizard. Yeah, and you're right. Klingon diversity isn't new. The franchise has always acknowledged that not every member of the species is a warrior per se. But here's the difference, and this is important. When previous Star Trek shows depicted non-warrior Klingons, they did it within the context of the culture. The Klingon lawyers in Deep Space Nine still operated within a society that valued combat and honor. They were unusual. They faced challenges because of their path. But the show never suggested that the warrior culture itself was the problem. Worf spent 7 seasons on The Next Generation struggling with his identity. He was raised by humans. He didn't always fit Klingon expectations. He had internal conflicts, but the show never told the audience that Klingon culture was wrong and needed to be fixed. Tensions were explored without dismissing either side. Starfleet Academy doesn't do that. Starfleet Academy positions Jaden's rejection of warrior values as the correct answer. The traditional Klingons are wrong. The ones who hold on to honor and combat are outdated. The future is emotional processing and debate class. And finally, that brings us to the much larger discussion and the reason we're talking about this. Why does this happen? Why do modern writers feel so comfortable destroying established lore? Why do they look at 60 years of world building and think, yeah, I could do better? If I'm to take what they create at face value, I think it comes down to 3 things: incompetence, hubris, and defiance. First, incompetence. Writing is a skill. It takes years to develop. It requires reading widely, studying structure, understanding why things work, failing a lot and learning from those failures, building a toolbox of techniques through practice and repetition. But the modern entertainment pipeline doesn't select for that. It selects for credentials, for connections, for fitting the right demographic boxes, for being able to work fast and cheap and not cause problems. The writer's room for a show like Starfleet Academy isn't staffed by people who spent decades studying Klingon lore and understanding what makes Star Trek work. It's staffed by people who got MFAs and wrote spec scripts for shows that were popular 3 years ago and know how to hit the beats that streaming algorithms reward. They're not equipped for the job. They don't have the depth of knowledge required to write in an established universe. They don't have the craft to create something genuinely new. So they default to what they know: contemporary tropes, therapy language, young adult drama beats, tabloid talking points, and TikTok ideology. Yeah, nobody stops them either, because the executives don't know any better. The whole pipeline is populated by people who learned storytelling from other television shows instead of from lived life experiences. This is a part I've talked about in videos past. This is Ouroboros content. Writers who learned storytelling from watching movies and TV are then writing movies and TV that are teaching the next generation of writers. Each cycle a little more removed from actual human experience. Each cycle a little more derivative. Each cycle a little more hollowed out. The Rings of Power showrunners said they based their version of Sauron on Walter White from Breaking Bad. Think about that. Skip the Tolkien mythology. Skip drawing inspiration from history or religion or philosophy. They're drawing from another TV show. TV writers copy a copy, and that's everywhere now. Modern writers don't create from their life experiences. They create from other media. They remix and reference and homage because that's all they know how to do. Their entire frame of reference is other entertainment. Is it any wonder the results feel hollow and empty now? Number 2, hubris. Modern writers walk into established franchises and genuinely believe they know better than the people who built them. They look at 60 years of Klingon lore and think, this could use some updating. They look at a warrior culture and think, what if we made them more emotionally vulnerable? They look at something that millions of people love and think, I can fix this. That's hubris. That's the arrogance of assuming your contemporary sensibilities are superior to decades of carefully constructed world building. That's thinking you're smarter than the audience, smarter than the original creators, smarter than the material itself. And the thing about hubris is it never questions itself. The hubristic writer doesn't wonder if maybe, just maybe, the original approach was right. They assume the original approach was flawed because it doesn't match their personal preferences. They need to improve it, evolve it. They modernize it into something that is unrecognizable. The writers of Starfleet Academy probably think they're doing something progressive, something brave. They're taking Star Trek into new territory. They're making it relevant for a new generation. But what they're actually doing is demonstrating that they don't understand what they're working on. They don't respect it. They think their ideas are more important than the foundation they're supposed to be building upon. And in the wider terms of Star Trek, where you have all these unique and well-defined alien cultures, not just Klingons, the writers self-insert themselves into every single alien species. Meaning, all the uniqueness of each culture becomes a slightly different shade of gray matter from the writer's ideological perspective. Every species on screen might look different. But as the show progresses, the character cultures, identities, and belief systems are all starting to sound nearly identical. Because anyone who thinks or believes differently than the writers, even in an alien sci-fi fiction, is wrong. Anyone who believes differently than the writer is not only incorrect, but needs to be corrected. You must think as I think. And that is dangerous. You see this across the entire industry, though. Writers who view legacy properties as raw material for their own vision instead of stories worth preserving, who think the original fans are obstacles rather than the reason the franchise has value, who believe that updating and modernizing are always improvements, regardless of whether the material needed updating in the first place. Do you know what word defines this activity? Because there is a specific word for it, and you're gonna love it. It's not stewardship, it's colonization. They're colonizers. No longer building upon the history that came before, writers are replacing legacy with themselves. And the third one is defiance. This is one of the hardest to prove, but easiest to feel, because when you watch how modern writers respond to criticism, you see something ugly. You see a refusal to engage, a dismissal of any points made, an active contempt for the people who care most about the franchises. When fans pushed back on Discovery, they were called toxic. When fans criticized Picard, they were told they didn't understand Star Trek. When fans complain about Starfleet Academy, they're dismissed as gatekeepers who can't handle change, dude bros who refuse to learn the lessons. And here's the thing, some fan criticism is toxic. Some of it is in bad faith. Some of it is people who just want to complain about everything. But an overwhelming amount of this criticism is legitimate. A lot of it is people who love Star Trek pointing out specific, articulable problems with how things are being handled. And instead of engaging with that feedback, the writers double down. They dig in. They treat fan criticism as validation that they're doing something brave and necessary. What's this? The fans are mad? Good. That means we're challenging them. That means we're pushing boundaries. That means we're not just giving them the same old thing. That's defiance. That's treating the audience as an enemy to be overcome rather than customers to be served. That's prioritizing your own vision over the people who actually care about the franchise. And it's everywhere. It's not just Star Trek, it's Star Wars, where fans who criticized the sequel trilogy were dismissed as man-babies who couldn't handle female protagonists. It's Lord of the Rings, where anyone who questioned Rings of Power was accused of racism. It's Marvel, where declining box office is blamed on superhero fatigue rather than declining quality. The writers don't think they're wrong, the audience is wrong, and they'd rather burn down a franchise than admit they made mistakes or take any kind of responsibility. So put all this together, incompetence, hubris, defiance, and you get modern franchise writing. You get shows that used beloved properties as vehicles for whatever the writers actually want to say. You get characters who are just contemporary people in a costume. You get updates and evolutions that are really just demolitions. You get slop wearing the skin of something that used to matter. The writers can't create anything original because creating something original requires skills they've never developed. So they have to borrow, they have to adapt, they have to insert themselves. They coast on recognition that other people built. And when audiences reject it, which audiences often do, they don't look inward. They don't ask what did they do wrong. They blame the fans, they blame the internet. They blame toxic masculinity or review bombing or whatever the excuse of the week is. There's a flavor of the week with the excuses of these writers. Because admitting they failed would require humility. And humility is one thing modern writers just don't have. Let's return to this episode and talk about the crying scene. There's a moment where Jayden cries. There's been discussions about whether this contradicts established canon because Klingons lack tear ducts in the lore. But honestly, the tear duct thing isn't the point. The point is what the crying represents. This scene is designed to be emotional, to show Jayden processing his trauma, to demonstrate vulnerability, and for certain audiences, that's effective. Starfleet Academy is made in the style of tween and twink dramas like 90210 and Vampire Diaries, right? There is an audience for emotionally vulnerable television and storytelling. But in the context of mainline canon Star Trek and Klingon culture, what does this scene say? It says that emotional vulnerability is more valuable than Klingon stoicism, that crying is growth, that the traditional Klingon approach of channeling pain into determination or combat or ritual is inferior to the modern therapy approach of just feeling your feelings and letting them out. That's not a Klingon story. That's a modern writer's therapy session projected onto an alien species with 60 years of history. The writers wanted to tell a story about emotional vulnerability. Fine. But instead of creating a character and context where that story fits naturally, they grafted it onto an existing culture where it doesn't fit at all. They used the Klingons as costumes for their own issues instead of doing the hard work of understanding what Klingon emotional processing would actually look like. Star Trek has always evolved, always changed, always tried new things. Each series of the past had its own tone and style, but they all respected what came before. Each series built on the foundation instead of demolishing it. You can tell new stories in an established universe. You can explore different perspectives. You can even challenge and complicate the lore here. But there's a difference between challenging something and completely dismissing it. between complicating something and undermining it. Starfleet Academy isn't evolving Star Trek, it's replacing it. It's using the brand name to sell something that contradicts everything the brand used to represent. And the writers either don't know, or worse, don't care. Look, I know some of you are thinking, Wizard, you said yourself you're not even a Star Trek fan. Why do you care about this? And that's fair. It's a reasonable question. I care because the pattern is the same everywhere. I care because what's happening to Star Trek happened to Star Wars. This particular episode that we're talking about here is the power of one too many witches from the Acolyte, intended to unravel Star Trek Klingons like they unraveled the Chosen One in Star Wars. The writers of these properties don't love them. They see them as platforms for their own ideas, and they're destroying decades of cultural value in the process. I don't have to be a Star Trek fan to recognize when something's being ruined. I don't have to have watched every single episode to understand that 60 years of consistent world building is being thrown away for short-term demographic targeting. And at some point, man, you gotta call it out, even if it's not your franchise, because if we don't, the next one they come for might be something you do love, if there's anything even left at this point. There are 5 people who ruined entertainment: corporate executives, marketing professionals, journalists who are PR managers, influencers who shill for them all, and writers who can't create but take over properties that real creators built. Incompetent, hubristic, defiant writers who treat audiences as obstacles and lore as suggestions, who'd rather burn down a franchise than admit they don't understand it, who blame fans for caring while they collect paychecks for its destruction. The only defense in front of us now is to stop engaging, to refuse to watch, to close your wallets and cancel your subscriptions and make it unprofitable for them to keep doing this. Starve them of your money, to support creators instead who build new things instead of parasites who feed on old things. The best analogy I have for this is that it's as if we're all sitting in a rotten old sandbox. Everything is muddy and gross, and you left your toys out in the sand, and in the rain, they're now gross too. They're ruined. The joints and screws are all rusted, the paint is coming off, the action figure lost a leg and you're never gonna find it. But for years, you've held on to these ruined toys. You've tried to clean them up, hoping that one day they might be clean enough again to play with, even though they're very much damaged and unfixable. No, those toys have had their day. I think it's time to go to the store and find some new ones now. Until next time, my friends, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, and for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. And subscribe to the channel. Bye-bye.